FFT Waiver Wire presented by Snickers. Rookie mistake? Maybe you just need a Snickers. Here are the top players to add if, let's just say, I don't know, you have Justin Jefferson. Like, you might need some help, and KJ Osborn, Jeff Wilson, they could help you out. You know who else could help you out? A couple of fellers that we have on set for you. Our fantasy football gurus, Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg.
How about Chris bailing on Emari Demarco's name, just like I bailed on
no chance.
Recruit's name once upon a time, doing an update. But that's a different story. We had a trade just happened, Dave. Van Jefferson going to the Falcons. So,
good. That's what the Falcons need, another playmaker on a playmaker. I'll use air quotes there.
Hey, it frees up some more targets for Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Let's get to some of the waiver wire situation that we're dealing with here because of Justin Jefferson's injury, being placed on IR with that hamstring problem. So, Dave, what are we doing in Minnesota without Jefferson? Is it just more for Addison, more for Hockenson, or are we going to get a big four-game stretch for KJ Osborn? And what do you do about Kirk Cousins now?
Define big, because I think it could be a pretty good stretch, but I don't know if it's going to be a big stretch. We've seen him get at least 5 targets in 20 games throughout his career. KJ Osborn, I'm talking about. He's gotten you at least 12 PPR points in 13 of those games. 11 of them involved a touchdown. So what I'm trying to tell you is that he seems to be a touchdown target from Kirk Cousins. That's not a bad thing, but the schedule, it's up and down for Minnesota. I still think that Addison's the one that takes the step forward. I think that Hockenson is going to be great. Both those guys must starts moving forward. But Osborn's got a chance to be a number 3 fantasy receiver until Justin Jefferson comes back. And it's not a guarantee that Jefferson will be back in 4 games. He could miss a little bit longer. If this season spirals out of control, the question has to be asked, will he even come back from injured reserve? So I think prioritizing Osborn is a good idea. And you asked me about Kirk Cousins, still a startable fantasy quarterback, but man, those expectations, they're going to hit the floor now. Probably a guy that you'll expect between 18 and 22 fantasy points a week from.
You alluded to this about Jefferson maybe not coming back, but the hope is that he's back in week 10 when he's first eligible. If you are 1-4, 0-5 in your fantasy league with Justin Jefferson, you should be trying to trade him as quickly as possible. If you are 5-0, 4-1, maybe good 3-2 team, you should be trying to acquire him also, because if he does come back and you're in the fantasy championship, fantasy playoffs, he's going to be a big boost to your roster. So hopefully he does come back after the 4 games. It sounds like he wants to play, but clearly, as you alluded to, if the season's spiraling out of control, he's going to be a contract situation coming up. So we hope to see him back out there doing what he does and being successful. All right, here are the wide receivers who are going to buy. Just 2 teams, the Packers and the Steelers. So no Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs are the headliners for Green Bay. Deontay Johnson could return in week 7, so you should be looking to pick him up or maybe buying low on him if you need a wide receiver. Here are the injuries that we're looking at as well at the position. On top of Justin Jefferson, you have Amon-Ra St. still dealing with that abdomen injury. Tank Dell is in the concussion protocol. Mike Evans should return in week 7. T. Higgins, we don't know yet. Zay Jones day-to-day with that knee injury. And then Traylon Burks not really a factor for fantasy managers, but he might be a factor for DeAndre Hopkins, given the fact that Hopkins has looked better the last 2 weeks without Burks on the field. All right, so the players that we're looking to add, again, Osborn is the headliner because of his opportunity now, but you also have Josh Reynolds, who stepped up without Amon-Ra St. in week 5 against the Panthers. Josh Downs loves Gardner Minshew because his 2 best games have come in the time that Minshew has played the majority of those snaps. Raji Rice is coming along for the Chiefs. Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith-Njigba hopefully will do the same thing as rookie wide receivers as well. And then Tyler Boyd stepping up without T. Higgins there. But let's talk about just a little bit more about KJ Osborn. So just looking at the situation and looking at the opportunity here, again, I don't really worry about the schedule when it comes to the Vikings because they're going to throw so much. So it's a difference really of the high end versus the floor, the ceiling versus the floor. But I think he's got top 30 upside. And I think he's got some potential to be a weekly starter even in 2 receiver leagues, especially when we only have 2 teams on a bye. We're going to see a lot more teams on a bye coming up. So how much fab are you spending on Osborn?
Depends how desperate I am for a wide receiver. If I'm pretty desperate, I might go as high as 15 to 20%. If I'm not that desperate, I'm probably not going to get him. I'll put in a fat bid of maybe around 10%. But I think someone else in the league would be desperate. Someone just lost Justin Jefferson. They're going to make a beeline for Osborn.
All right, and then you got Josh Reynolds, who, again, has been good on his own. 2 games with 12 or more PPR points to start the season in the first 4. But last week we saw a huge boost, 17.6 PPR points against the Panthers in the first game without Amon-Ra St. So assuming Amon-Ra St. is back in week 6,
right?
Give me the scenario for Reynolds, and then give me the scenario if there is no Amon-Ra St.
Reynolds is going to be a great bye-week replacement at wide receiver and a decent flex, and it does sound like St. Brown is going to be back. Dan Campbell said that it was more probable than questionable that he would be back, but you never know what's going to happen this year. We've lost so many big-time players. You want to get guys on your bench who can end up contributing when you need them. And this is the perfect type of wide receiver to carry on your bench and use as a bye week replacement, like I said, because he's got potential to get you double-digit PPR points, even when St. Brown plays. And when he doesn't, he was over 15 just this past week. So I think that there's definitely appeal for Josh Reynolds. You should go and target him if you don't get Osborn.
And I will say this, if it's just a one-week situation, I like Reynolds better than Osborn. Long term, I like Osborn better than Reynolds, but for this week,
you're talking about for just this week.
For week 6, I'd rather play Reynolds over Osborn.
Even if St. Brown?
No, only if St. Brown is out. If St. Brown is in,
okay.
then I would go Osborn over.
I would too.
Over Reynolds. All right, let's move now to the players that you're moving on from at the wide receiver position. Jahan Dotson, frustrating start to the season so far, only 1 touchdown. Thought he would build off it against the Bears. He did score in week 4, did not do very well against Chicago. Brandon Cooks has just been miserable, getting outplayed by Michael Gallup. Sky Moore is a forgotten man, even in the meetings the Chiefs have had with the media. They're not even talking about Sky Moore. They're talking about Raji Rice and Justin Ross and other guys there. And Rashid Shaheed, when Alvin Kamara came back and Derek Carr hurt his shoulder, his production has gone absolutely south, so you can avoid him as well. Let's talk about some running backs here. So Devon Achane expected to miss some time, not put on IR yet, but that's still a probability. James Conner, same thing. Both guys dealing with knee injuries. So the Dolphins and the Cardinals expected to miss their top 2 running backs. For Miami, it's a little bit different because they still have Raheem Mostert, and they might be getting Jeff Wilson back. He's been on IR to start the season with a rib injury. They have Saquon Barkley as well. For the Cardinals, they have a mess of guys that they're going to try and work in, but Emari Demarco looks like the leader there. We'll talk about him in a second. In terms of Achane, Dave, same thing with Justin Jefferson. Are you trying to trade for him to acquire him, or is this a little bit more concerning knowing that running back knee injury, crowded backfield? Does he have the same appeal like a Justin Jefferson has, obviously given the fact of what each player has done in their respective career?
Yeah, if I'm 5-0 and 4-1, I'm interested in acquiring Devon Achane and waiting this out. Now, I'm not going to give up what I would give up to get Justin Jefferson. It's going to come at a lower price, and that's where I think there's a disconnect between what Achane's value is, because the fantasy managers that have Achane, they probably have a couple of wins under the belt because of Achane, and they don't want to give him away knowing that they might need him a little bit later on. So I think Achane's probably going to end up being a hold for most fantasy managers.
And then James Conner, again, just looking at the situation, he's been good, hasn't been great. The touches I thought were going to be a little bit more slanted in his favor over the first 4 games. Well, taking out week 5 when he left, but he hasn't exactly been dominating to that level. Not that anybody else has been taking a lot of work, but they've just been relying on Josh Dobbs, I think, more than we expected. Connor's been very good. He just hasn't been consistently elite. But now you have this mess of guys behind him of Emari Demarco, of Keontae Ingram's got a neck injury, Tony Jones, who they just signed. So it could be a mess. We'll talk about Demarco in a second, but that's the situation in Arizona right now. So let's show you the running backs who are on a bye for this week. Again, it's just Green Bay and Pittsburgh. So hopefully Aaron Jones is healthy coming off of the bye. A.J. Dillon filled in admirably first time on Monday night against the Raiders. Warren has outproduced Najee Harris in PPR every game so far this season. That's reflected in their points per game. As you see here, 10 for Warren, 6.7 for Najee. The running back injuries along with Achane. Now, Raheem Mostert's dealing with knee injury, but he's expected to be okay. We hope to get Jahmyr Gibbs back from the hamstring injury. The Bears situation is interesting because you have Khalil Herbert with a high ankle sprain and Roschon Johnson dealing with a concussion, and hopefully Austin Eckler and Saquon Barkley do return in week number 6. All right, here are the players that we're looking. Oh, I'm sorry, more injuries. It's just been such a brutal position. I forgot about Javonte Williams dealing with the quad and hip injury, and then these other guys are really more fill-ins aside from Jeff Wilson, who should come back from his abdomen rib injury that he's been dealing with to start the season. The running backs to add for this week. So you got Emari Demarco, you got Deontay Foreman, you got Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell. So you can look at both those guys if you're looking at one maybe short-term, one long-term, and then Jeff Wilson as well, taking on the Panthers. Well, let's start with the Cardinal situation, Dave. So Demarco, 10 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown against the Bengals in week 5 after James Conner left. Is he the #1 running back to go get?
If you need a running back in week number 6, the answer is yes, until we find out that Jeff Wilson's going to play, and then the answer becomes maybe. But we're not going to know if Jeff Wilson's going to play until potentially Friday, if not Sunday.
So you you'd rather have the backup in Miami as opposed to the starter in Arizona?
If I knew right now.
If I'm telling you right now, Demarco is the starter for the Cardinals.
Oh, then I'd rather have Demarco.
Okay.
Right. This is a little bit more about long-term versus short-term, too. If we're thinking long-term, I'd rather have Wilson because I'm not sure how many weeks Demarco can be the guy. But when I went back and watched his tape from last week and weeks before, you know who he reminded me of? He reminded me of James Conner. Big, physical, can finish his runs, can catch the ball. You mentioned Conner's workload not being what we thought he was. We thought he'd be an every down back for Arizona. Demarco's been playing on 3rd downs. My worry is that the Cardinals don't want to put too much on Demarco's plate, and they use these other running backs like Keontae Ingram and Tony Jones to help him shoulder the rushing load, and they keep him on those third down plays. That's not what we want to have happen. I think he's probably just barely talented enough to see in that neighborhood of 12 to 14 touches per week. It's not pretty at running back this week off the waiver wire, but he's the best guy if you need a running back for week 6.
In Chicago, we have, again, Khalil Herbert dealing with a high ankle sprain and Roschon Johnson, the concussion protocol. Now, it's interesting with Johnson because he got hurt on Thursday, and what we saw, at least for Luke Musgrave, the tight end for the Packers, got hurt in week 4, suffered a concussion, was able to play Monday night in week 5. So the extra couple of days should help Roschon Johnson. If he's ready to go, he is the running back that you want for the Bears. But again, he may not play in week 6. So D'Onta Foreman now gets activated off the inactive squad and hopefully will be able to contribute for the Bears. He's going to contribute regardless because, again, Herbert's going to miss some time. So Foreman in week 6 might be fantastic. Tough matchup against the Vikings. Their run defense has been good. But again, if you're looking at it and Roschon Johnson is available and D'Onta Foreman's available, go get Roschon Johnson ahead of Foreman. Foreman might still just be the backup in Chicago. In Miami, you have Jeff Wilson coming back, we hope, for week 6. As Dave said, he would prioritize him over Demarco if you knew that he was going to be the guy there for Miami. But we know the second guy in Miami. But Raheem Mostert's going to be the guy and has been the guy in tandem with Devon Achane. So what do you expect from Wilson, short-term, long-term, because we don't know how long Devon Achane's going to be out?
Well, I think it would be in the neighborhood of around 10 to 12 touches per game. He would be the second running back behind Raheem Mostert there, and so Mostert would get the lead work. I don't think they necessarily specialize their snaps from one week to the next where it's a goal line guy or a third down guy. They mixed and matched Mostert and Achane quite evenly over the last 3 games. So I think Wilson would be in that same type of mixture, and I just want a piece of this offense. They're scoring a lot of points. So that's the appeal for Jeff Wilson for me.
8 games last year he played with the Dolphins after being traded from San Francisco, 5 of them 10.6 PPR points or more. Running backs we're moving on from, it's the aging trio of Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, and Ezekiel Elliott. The only one that might have some interest to you is Kareem Hunt, just to see what happens coming off a bye, but not somebody you want to hold on to. Tight ends that we're looking at here, the guys on the bye, Luke Musgrave, Pat Freiermuth, no need to hold on to them. The injuries at the position a little bit more telling. Now, Travis Kelce, according to Andy Reid, is going to practice on Wednesday, should be able to, practice on Tuesday, should be able to go for Thursday's game. That's a positive. Dalton Kincaid probably going to be out. You can move on from him, as we'll show you. Dawson Knox should be able to play, so that's a boost for him. And then again, some of the guys that are missing. So here are the tight ends you're looking to add: Logan Thomas, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Conklin, Jonnu Smith, and Dawson Knox. Some of these guys, in terms of Thomas and Schultz, coming off big games. Conklin and Smith have been productive at a lower end scale. Dave, in terms of Logan Thomas taking on the Falcons this week, is he a must-start tight end?
I think he qualifies. He's certainly more of a streamer than a starter, but look at what he did last week. That was pretty amazing. I think fantasy managers could buy into Logan Thomas as someone that they'll start from week to week, and if he continues to get targets, and he's been getting a lot of them, the tight ends collectively in Washington have been getting a lot of them, then I think he could end up being a top 12 tight end from game to game.
Falcons #2 in most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. They just made Dalton Schultz look like a Hall of Famer. Tight ends moving on from: Tyler Higbee, season low 2 catches, return of Cooper Kupp, bad for Higbee. Kincaid, concussion protocol, not producing. Pat Freiermuth on a bye if you want to pick him up just to see if you can use him again in week 7. Hopefully he's back from his hamstring injury, but again, not someone you need to roster. Quarterbacks on a bye: Jordan Love, Kenny Pickett. Jordan Love has been miserable the last 2 weeks. Certainly was awful Monday night. You can drop him if you need to, and Kenny Pickett just not a consistent fantasy producer. The guys that we're dealing with in terms of injuries, the big one is Anthony Richardson, out with the shoulder injury. We don't know how long he's going to miss. Daniel Jones should be okay, but nobody's trusting him. And Justin Herbert should be good to go. We're waiting to find out about Deshaun Watson with a shoulder injury. Geno Smith should be able to play coming back off a bye with that knee injury. All right, you got these 3 guys to add here, but really the one that's the talking point is Gardner Minshew, because he's going to start for however many games that Anthony Richardson will miss. 15 fantasy points against Baltimore when he started in week 3. Does he have a chance to get some revenge against the Jaguars in week 6, Dave?
I think so. The Jaguars have given up at least 22 fantasy points to 4 of the past 5 quarterbacks that they've faced. It's not that he knows that defense or anything like that. I just think that he's actually playing decently well, and he's going to have some good opportunities to throw downfield off of play action with the running game that Indianapolis has created here. So don't mind him as a streamer this week. Not going to be a top 12 quarterback for me.
Very exciting to see the way that he performs. So hopefully it's going to be something that continues. All right, let's talk about some trades here, Dave. So, oh, I'm sorry. Quarterbacks that we're dropping before we get to the trades.
Okay.
Everybody's excited about trades. We're dropping Jordan Love. We're dropping Daniel Jones.
Yeah, listen, I've been a big Jordan Love guy. I kind of want to hang on to him just to see what happens, but I almost think we're at the point where you could drop him and no one's going to go and pick him up. So just pick him up a week later.
All right, so we'll see what happens with Jordan Love. Hopefully he gets a little bit better, I don't know, mechanics, production, everything coming
How
off the
about
bike.
throwing an on-target pass?
Yeah, just
Can
throw
you do that?
Throw it to Christian Watson a little bit more. All right, check out our Fantasy Football Tape podcast, wherever podcasts are found. We help you dominate your fantasy leagues. We're helping you with all your waiver wire moves, your starts and sits, and some trades. The Fantasy Football Tape podcast, wherever podcasts are available.